Okay, we're live.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome. Welcome to this little webinar. And what are we going to be talking about, Johnny?
Well, I just wanted to say a big thank you to various bodies, sponsors. But first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the Wadandi people of this country and the elders, past, present and future. I'd like to thank the Southwest Catchment Council and the National Landcare Program for hosting this webinar, and especially the Leschenault Catchment Council. Throughout the webinar, if you have questions, just wait until the 9:40, that part of it. So if you can see that from now until 8:10, we'll just be going through the introduction and the housekeeping. The toilets are over there.
Where your toilets are, we're not quite sure.
That's right. That's the good thing about a webinar is that,
Where's your own toilet?
I've got a pair of shorts on. So yeah, we'll have a bit of a structure to it. It is different with a webinar because you don't get the full feeling of what's, we can't hear you. We can't hear the shouting.
No.
But yeah, without further ado, we'll get into it.
Righty-ho. So what we're going to talk about is why would you bother putting in a habitat garden?
Yeah, okay. So, you've got a decline of biodiversity. You've got a decline of little native animals. My boys, 17 and 19, and they talk about the insects that they're not seeing anymore. And the different animals, bearded dragons and things like that. So there is a noticeable decline, and that's got to do with our habitat. Well, we're taking up habitat with these little critters. So, for you as a home gardener, there's many of us, so many of us can make up one big picture, and to be able to give something back, it's very rewarding. And what can they give you? Well, enjoyment is.
Absolutely. And because of habitat loss, it makes the home garden even more important now, because if you get a few gardens all in the one street, then basically you're creating a corridor as well for all those little animals that come and visit. And there's something really lovely about watching the evolution of visitors that come to your garden, the greater the diversity that you have, then the greater diversity of things that come in and visit your garden.
And, with COVID, you hear the different kind of surveys that they conduct and how people deal with stress and deal with solitude, and realising that their garden is their sanctum, and it's come to the fore with COVID. It's always been there, getting your hands dirty, getting out at night, getting out during the day and observing what's visiting your garden is a very enjoyable kind of thing to happen. And it's an escape. You've been at the office or you've been somewhere all day, and you can just sit with a glass of wine or a cup of tea, whatever, and just take it all in. And it gives you great enjoyment. But there's something in it for us that they give us, and they're what they call the ecosystem services. And those services are things like pollinators. So you've got native bees. This is the blue-banded bee over here. That's a pollinator of many of our Solanaceae family. We'll go into that. And the Solanaceae family are probably one of the most, the production plants, tomatoes, potatoes, those kinds of plants, as well as native plants. The blue-banded bee is quite a big bee. So when it's out there, you should be able to see it. This one over here is a resin bee, and they can pollinate production plants, there are a lot of them that are very specialised.
Yeah.
And so they're roped into, some of them are roped into specific species of native plants. This little one here is actually a Euryglossid morrisoni. And if you know the Verticordia nitens, that is a specific pollinator to that particular species. I don't know if you can see where my arrow is, but that little critter there, that's specific to that. And there's a lot of wasps that we have that are specific to certain orchids.
Yes. Yep.
And so they're tied in. They can be very habitat-specific relationships.
So those insects are the ones that are really under threat, because unless that species of plant is there, or that genus, then there's no food for them, and therefore they die out.
And sometimes just a little shift in the seasons, because the rainfall becomes later, all the indicators for that particular plant to flower are different. And so when you've got that wasp that pollinates that particular orchid, all of a sudden the plant is flowering at a different time that it is ready for that wasp to come in and pollinate that plant. The timings, they haven't married up, and so the pollination of that particular plant doesn't occur. So you know, there are those things that happen that are showing a steep decline. Some of our other pollinators, this one's a bee fly, and this is a Pimelia plant, and we'll talk about more of this particular flower colour later. But that particular bee fly has got a long proboscis, and it is they will guard their territory. And when you sit, and I'll get back, I'll reiterate, you need to sit in your garden
and observe. We forgot to do that. I think because now everyone's very time poor, they tend not to actually spend time. They look at their garden and go, oh my God, I've got all that weeding to do. But in actual fact, if you're a lazy gardener and you have a garden that's just sort of gone wild, then that is ideal for insects.
Yeah. So, I mean, we talk about insects, but we'll talk about invertebrates, things with backbones, because that's where we've got to kind of make sure we focus. But look, we've got hoverflies over here. Hoverflies, they're a pollinator, but they're also a predator as well. They're a very beneficial predator. We'll get with that. They're little honey possums.
And they are totally reliant on a 12-month supply of nectar. So this is, you know, we'll always hark back to the importance of having a diversity of plant species that flower throughout the year. We'll go into that in a bit more detail later on.
So those little honey possums, there's a population north of Perth at Ellenbrook. That's an outlier population. Then you've got the populations down in the southwest, down through the south coast. There actually is a population up through Invertebrate, up through that Badgingarra area too.
Apparently,
yeah. So, you know, they're basically the size of a mouse with these little stripes on them. They're the most beautiful little critter that you'll come across, very cute.
And very, very sociable. They live in these sort of large family groups, and they're fast. They're like a
very fast
speeding bullet. It's very difficult to see them. But Banksias, they absolutely love the door, and you'll quite often see a whole family on the one Banksia plant if you are lucky.
Actually, grass trees, when you actually salvage the grass trees, the little hollows, the dead arms of the grass tree, even underneath the skirts, the honey possums will live in there. So yeah, there's another kind of plant that you could look at a habitat for. Not only does it aesthetically pleasing in your garden, but it's providing an important role of habitat shelter for the little honey possums. And then just down below here, this bird over here, this is a western spinebill. It's disappearing a lot from the metropolitan area, but through the southwest, they're quite a common feature. I will say this is that if you do put too many of the one species, and the one species that I'll probably talk about is the grevilleas and the bottlebrushes, you will drive those little timid birds out, and it's quite well documented. I've seen it before. Even living on a bush block, you can reduce the diversity of birds just by putting in a monoculture of plants that you are told to purchase, such as those red bottlebrushes and the high nectar yielding grevilleas.
Yeah.
And this is an Australian painted lady, this butterfly over here, and they are an important pollinator as well. Even, like, I haven't included ants, there's wasps. Anything that eats nectar or pollen, it goes from one flower, goes from that flower to another flower, is a pollinator. So having, knowing that, there's a whole lot of animals, especially invertebrates, that are actually beneficial pollinators. Then you've got the predators. I did talk about the hoverfly before. There's things that we haven't put in there, like lady beetles.
Yes, yeah. Lacewings.
Lacewings. So
there's lots of insects that are very important pollinators.
Yeah. And people, there's room for your garden for reptiles, these little reptiles. That's a wolf spider eating one of those green caterpillars that we call pests.
A pest.
Yeah. Same with the dragonflies. This was actually taken in Sabrina's garden, and I'll show you some slides of that actually happening later. That's a damselfly. That's a blue ringtail, that one. Quite common in waterways and in ponds. This is a robberfly, voracious predator of flies. And that's one of the cuckoos.
Oh, yeah.
And that's got a little, like a grub in its mouth, a little larvae of a grub. Okay, so
how do we do it?
How do you do it? So it's really good to know about your target species, know a bit about the biology. Look, my into this is through frogs, and understanding that frogs, most of them are brown, actually don't like a lot of water, and they burrow, and they only like water at a certain time, and that's just a little snapshot of what I'm talking about, and it gives you an idea of how to, a full-on pond isn't good for most of our frogs. Mm. So when you're talking about insects, you should see what the insects see.
Yeah. So you have to think about not only what they see, but what they require for their life cycle, and try and understand the life cycle, because it's different for each insect. And that's actually really fascinating and a lot of fun. And we'll talk about some of the resources you can look at to find out, you'll find out what the life cycle is, you'll find out what they prefer to eat, you'll see what sort of plant that they're most attracted to, because that provides food for them. You'll see if they partner up with other insects and have some sort of beneficial partnership. And it's a great thing to do with kids too. So you try and find out as much as you can about that species.
Yeah. Something has to eat something, and if you have a pest, there will be something that will come along and eat that. So if you've got, say, aphids in your garden, understanding the breeding biology of a hoverfly, lady beetles, aphids, they're on they're number one on the hoverfly larvae list.
They're actually one of the most popular things to eat for many insects and birds, of course.
Yeah. So if you've got roses and they're getting plundered at the moment, that's what happens. That's one of the benefits of a habitat garden. If you happen to have a veggie garden next to a habitat garden, guess what? You've got pest control and you've got pollination services happening free of charge. And so, it's a win-win situation.
And if you're looking at an insect and you start to do some research on them, you will find for many insects their larval stage is very different to what they look like as an adult. And ladybirds are a perfect example of that. So if you go and spray aphids, there may be ladybird larvae that you are killing at the same time. So the number one big thing is do not use pesticides or insecticides.
It's something that's pretty well documented these days. So, know your target species, understanding their habitat niches. And the habitat niches that we're talking about are, as Sabrina said, what they eat, where they sleep or roosting sites, where they nest. And there's food sources throughout the year that they need to exploit. So you need to look at what those are. And these are this is an example of target species. We've got the invertebrates, and they're number one on our list because they are the pinnacle they're the keystone species for the survival of all the other things. The little things on this planet, folks, that's what counts. So we look at the upside down pyramid, and we look at that pyramid and try and make sure that the small things are most abundant. And I always say this is like whales and krill. You need lots of krill. You don't have as many whales. Those krill feed the other animals. So it's important to understand what needs to be front and centre in your garden, the most abundant. And the insects are the most mobile of them. So you'll see them coming in and out.
Yeah.
Just almost straight away.
Yeah. And I know that people freak out about spiders. Spiders are the most wonderful predator to have in your garden. And they will eat all sorts of things. And most of them are really, really small. But the other thing, you get birds that actually predate on spiders. So if you've got those black house spiders on your back veranda, don't spray them, don't kill them, because a wattle bird will come along and they absolutely love them. They'll hang upside down to get them.
Yeah.
So spiders are really important to keep in the garden. They're not scary things at all. And in fact, they're quite funky. I don't know of anything else that has that many legs coming out of its head. I think that's a very clever design.
And those spider webs, the actual webs, when you look at a nest, bird's nest, a lot of the bird's nests are actually held together with spider webs. Yeah. So they use that for building blocks. Birds, look, there's nectarivores. They're the nectar feeding birds. And a lot of our nectar feeding birds, such as our little honey eaters, even the common, New Holland honey eaters, the red wattle birds, the brown honey eaters, and even the western spinebill, they all eat insects. So, you may be providing nectar for them, but you've got to make sure you look at the insects as well. Then you've got the insectivores. So the ones that we're mainly looking at today are the small insectivores, such as, your robins, your wrens, your pardalotes. We've got granivores. I'm getting a little bit technical. Hopefully I just want to be able to set the scene. So granivores are mainly seed eaters, and then your doves, or your pigeons, your native pigeons, etc. And you've got your carnivores, which are your birds of prey, and then you have your omnivores, such as magpies.
They like a mixed
ravens.
buffet.
They have a mixed buffet for sure. Yeah. And with the mammals, we're only going to stick to 3 main groups today because we've only got a certain amount of time. But the mammals are quite well. This is why we're here today. We're about the western ringtail possum and how we can provide habitat for those little guys because they are critically endangered. Then there's quenders, so they're quite common in our backyards, in our front yards, and bats. So bats are one of those little animals that are unsung heroes when it comes to mosquito control.
Absolutely, they knock off heaps of them. And we're not talking the big fruit bats, we're talking the smaller micro bats. They're very small, and if you sit outside at night and you've got a light that uplights a tree and the insects come in, if you sit very quietly and you wait until dark, then you'll see the little micro bats coming and feasting.
Yeah, and you can only hear, there's 1 or 2 that you can hear. There's only, pretty sure there's 2 species that you can hear. The rest of them, there's probably about 6 odd species that survive throughout the metropolitan and the southwest, and they all take up various layers within the stratosphere, and they all have different varying sizes, but the size of your hand is a pretty big kind of bat. Usually they fit in the palm of your hand. Just a word of warning, don't go and handle a bat unless you've been inoculated.
Oh yes, there is a disease.
They carry a few diseases. So just make sure that the carers are quite important, and they are usually inoculated against various diseases that they carry. But this is just what we were elaborating before, is about the plethora of insects, and you can see that green, and it pretty much paints its own picture. They are the ones that rule the planet, really.
So that again is showing that upside down pyramid. You need lots and lots and lots of the little critters.
And this is just like a little statement that our David Attenborough has said, that if the invertebrates were to disappear, our soil fertility wouldn't happen, our pollination wouldn't happen, we wouldn't be fed, and it would be a domino effect everywhere. You'd be dung carrion, things wouldn't break down. So yeah, they have a pivotal role in our system. Look, I just looking at this, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I just want you to understand what the colour spectrum is: red, yellow, green, blue, violet. If you learnt physics at school, it's called Roy G. Biv, okay? Roy G. Biv: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And so this table kind of gives you an idea of what animals see. So birds see red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. But insects, on the other hand, generally they do not see red. They do not see on this spectrum here, and they see these colours. So when you are looking at an ecosystem, when you look at an ecosystem, you won't see a lot of big reds in an ecosystem. The reason being is that the little things matter, and if you have lots of reds, you're going to have lots of big things. And humans, well, we see red, we see fewer kind of spectrums, the rest of, and rabbits. I've just put that in there for namesake. So when you're looking at plant-animal relations, like we did allude to Solanaceae, and I apologise if I'm using scientific jargon, but we've got to use some science to direct the story. So Solanaceae is one of the important species, but
For a gardener.
for a gardener, that's producing tomatoes, potatoes, eggplant and chilies.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you look up here, there's myrtaceae, which is eucalypts. Myrtaceae is that plant that if you break it, you can smell it. It has that beautiful eucalyptus smell.
And I guess, you know, eucalypts would be one of the most commonly planted, well, the most common plant in many people's gardens. It's interesting that when block sizes were bigger, people put in big eucalypts.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, it's the small mallees that attract far more insects than what the big tall trees will attract birds. But those little mallees with multiple flowers and smaller flowers are very good at attracting insects.
And it's something else we'll elaborate more, but with those myrtaceae and even the proteaceae, they have a lot of peeled bark. And so when you look at the plant, the insects are able to interact with the bark and deposit their pupa, their eggs inside the peeled bark. So that's another attribute. So we're talking, you know, basically there's attributes of the plant, and the attributes are flower is one attribute. So the flower colour is really important. For insects, you've got to look at from yellows, blues, indigos, violets. Then the next thing is not only flower, but then you've got to look at your flowering continuum, and it's called a flowering phenology. So the flowering phenology is about understanding that you should be able to get a list of plants, and you should be able to look at when they are flowering. So from January, February, March, April, May, June, July, and so on and so on, you should be able to have a flowering event for that whole year. So how would you get something? How would you get that kind of information? We'll get to it's.
There's usually on plant tags now. It usually has when it flowers. So, and George Lulfitz wrote a fantastic book, which is West Australian flowering throughout the year, WA plants, and it's every single season, and it's a great resource to go to, because that you look at all the different coloured flowers as well as the time when they flower. And I guess gardeners always get very excited in spring. So they go and buy all the plants that flower in spring, and then they've got nothing during summer, autumn or winter.
Yeah.
So it's something to really bear in mind, and you can just make sure that you go to a nursery every season and get the plants that are in flower.
What I want to add to that is, why don't you look at the Noongar seasons? So every second month, look at what you can put in, because within the season there's another season, and there's little indicators in there that once you're intimate with the land, you can see there's changes. The seasons, and you can even go onto websites for different plant nurseries. So there's, let's rattle off a few of the nurseries that we would go to. There's in the southwest, there's Boyanup Botanical, Leschenault Community Nursery. There's a Geograph Community Nursery. Through Perth, there's Xantheria.
Xantheria have excellent fact sheets. George Lulfitz still has fact sheets up on the website, even though he doesn't have a nursery now.
Yeah.
Plant Right have a nursery, and they have a list of when all the plants are flowering as well.
Yeah.
Then the Australian Native Nursery out at Oakford. Nancy has she has lots of information on, it's all on a graph of the name of the plant, the size, the soil type.
Soil type,
Soil type is vitally important, because our species, our West Australian plants, have evolved on very nutrient poor soils. So, and there is a big difference between the soils that you find on the coast and the soils inland, or even within Perth, the soils in the hills to the soils down on the coast. The same in the entire southwest. You can get soil maps if you're not sure what your soil type is. But remember that our plants are very soil specific, and that goes for the Proteaceae family in particular, or the Banksias, Hakeas, Grevilleas, Dryandras. So you really need to know what soil you're dealing with.
And if you're inland, there's a rule of thumb I remember George Lulfitz talking about. And if you're inland, you can actually use the plants that are inland on the coast.
Yes.
But you can't go from the coast inland, right, because of the clay that's involved, and the plant will come across that capping and then won't survive anymore. So just understand that there's limitations, and you know, when you go to a good nursery, they'll ask you where you live. The reason being is that they want to know what your soil type is. And if you look on any, as I said, if you look on any reputable nursery, they will have that information on their plant lists.
On their lists. Yeah.
So it's vitally important you follow those things. So the invertebrates, well, this is a thanks to the guys at Spineless Wonders. They produce these posters. You can see there's a gamut of various kind of insects that we have in the southwest, and we've also talked about the little Euryglossid, the native bee that's specific to that verticordia. There's lots of the verticordias that survive throughout the well, not only the southwest, they extend right up into the Midwest and inland down on the south coast. Quite a pretty plant to have in your garden, but have a vital role when it comes to providing food for many of our little insects or invertebrates as well. And that included in the invertebrates, you can see the spider and there's scorpions, there's mites as well. So when I was saying about insects generally don't see red, when you look at this plant over here, the eucalypt, you see all the red tinges on it? That is an example of nature saying, okay, I'm invisible because
I don't want you eating my new leaves. I've spent so much energy producing these.
Yeah.
And plants are pretty clever. So that also reflects that relationship, that evolution of plants and insects have evolved together, particularly flowering plants.
Yeah. So that plant is able to flower, set seed, reproduce itself, and then it'll be pruned. And then nature's pruners are the insects. So that's an example of how nature has seen that colour spectrum as to get away with doing that. Some of my favourite plants that I've come across, the snakebush. Snakebush, that is one of the favourites of the blue-banded bee.
Hemiandra.
Hemiandra, and it makes for a. I've seen there's upright hemiandras that you can get instead of the prostrate ones, and I've seen the upright ones, and when you plant them in a cluster, they'll all join up, and birds actually like using that.
Because they're prickly.
Yes, so that's another plant attribute. So we've been through colour, we've been through the phenology, that's that flowering throughout the year. And now the next thing we're going to talk about is structure. So with that is quite prickly, and it's important to include prickly plants in your garden because little birds especially will use that as a thoroughfare, and they will use it for not only when they come in for their water, they'll use it as a thoroughfare connection points. So there's lots of feral animals, whether they're native or non-native. You've got the next door neighbour's cat, or you've got your cat. My advice is keep your cat inside day and night. There are some other things, do's and don'ts, that we'll get to with regard to a habitat garden a bit later. But prickly plants are important, and we'll go through.
Great prickly hakeas.
Hakeas are one of my favourite.
Sensational.
One of my favourite plants for prickly plants are the hakeas. So, so the next one over here is Herbaceae, and that is probably one of the most that you'll find an abundance of insects in amongst beetles, in amongst the Herbaceaes. The pea flowers. Now, the pea flowers have been put together with the wattles, and I'm finding that the pea flowers are becoming quite important when it comes to insects. Not only are the pea flowers and the wattles important from that point of view, but from a native legume.
Absolutely. And so they're nitrogen fixers, so they're great to have in the soil. And we all grow peas and we grow beans, and we know about that. But many of our native plants do exactly the same thing. So for burrowing animals in particular, that root system that they're chewing is quite important for them, as well as putting food back into the soil and building up the biology of the soil.
And if you shift it into a house and they've gone and just raised the whole thing, the native legumes are really important. And they'll do that particular role. They reinvigorate the soil,
get that structure back,
and the wattles, native wattles as well. There's an example of some pea flowers. This is a Davicia. That's stunning, and they have these. They're an orange. They're an orange out here, and they're a yellow in the middle. So they're like little landing pads, and sometimes they direct. But what it does, it's directing the insect where to land and to get their pollen. Because these particular plants, these Davicias, they don't produce nectar; they produce pollen. It's still another food source for the insects and the
another
invertebrates.
Wonderful prickly plant.
Yes, they are.
Davicias.
Yeah.
But they blow the colours of the flowers in Davicias blow your eyeballs out. Like, really, they're beautiful too. A lot of people use chorizimas in their garden for the same reason, with the beautiful orange flowers.
Yeah, they're good performers.
But Davicias, they were very difficult to get at one stage, but I've noticed there's a lot more in the nurseries now.
Yeah, they're good performers. Down here is a Conostylus. So you're actually looking at, this is more of a ground tufted plant. Quite a showy plant, that yellow flower colour that we're after. Beetle city in those flowers. So not only are they pollinating, but they're a good food source. These are Dampieras. It's just down the road from my place, and it's just in proliferation right now. And this is Eremea, and they are one of those important plants that actually flower from December, January, February. They flower in the latter part or the early part of the year when it's quite marginal. So it's important to understand what they do. This colour here, this picture here, with all the yellows, and that's a natural system. That's a system that's been burnt. And if you look at a natural system regenerating, the predominant colour that you'll see is yellows and blues. And the reason being is that nature knows that it has to get those particular colours in abundance to get the pollinators back. So, and bring in those pollinators, then you bring your food sources in. So you're bringing in your birds and other animals. So Yeah, nature's kind of given us these indicators, and we should really look at it when we look at our garden design, is looking at those spectrum of colours. Here's some more plants that, well, this is a hakea that we were talking about before, and when you've got a hakea, when you've got a plant that's growing in the bush, and then you have it growing in your garden, there's things that usually people have reticulate them, or they might put some fertiliser on them, some minerals, etc., or slow release. They take on a different form and a different aspect, and so this is a Hakea prostrata, and it's named accordingly. It's a prostrate kind of plant, and it's very prickly, but the little birds love it.
They're safe in there, and lizards as well.
Yeah, so that kind of ground cover habit is, and see these leaves, how they branch out. They'll actually collect other leaves, and if you go out early enough in the morning, you'll see little birds. They'll actually, the dew collects in the leaf, and that's where they get their water from in nature. These are woolly bushes. These are Perth woolly bushes, and probably one of my favourite plants for the garden. I really rate them. Well, they're not only, they extend north of Perth, but they extend south of Mandurah. I really rate them because of their, they're fire retardant.
Yeah, they are too.
Yeah.
So, and there's many different forms of Adenanthus you can get now, from a ground cover to a very narrow upright shrub to a wide shrub. So they come in lots of different sizes. People usually miss the flower. The flower's extraordinary, and you can see that it's very small and tubular. And when you watch the types of birds that come to Adenanthus, you can see that their beak is designed exactly for that kind of tubular flower.
Yeah, even honey possums.
Oh yeah, with their little.
There's one.
Little tongues.
There's one species called Adenanthus menzeri, and that is one of the favourite. That's been identified as one of the favourite plants for the food sources for honey possums.
What about? Oh yeah, what about for other possums? Would they?
The Adenanthus?
Yeah.
No. For the bigger animals, it's more of the Banksias, and we'll go into the possum stuff, the bigger possum stuff after our break. Just on the right here, that's another form of woolly bush. That's a Cunninghamiana. It's the Albany woolly bush grows to about 3 or 4 metres high. This one is a really great one for the home garden, for the small yard. It grows to about, at the most, 2 metres. At the very, very most, I'd say 1.5 metres by 2 metres.
And they're very fast growing.
Yeah, and they've got a soft kind of foliage, but I've seen splendid wrens interact with them. So the way they interact is actually through this bark, and they will be looking for insects. Yeah. So we did talk about how plants, how do you get, the different resources, and we did talk about going to nurseries, looking on nursery websites. Florabase is one of those websites that I rely on quite a lot. And this is an example of interrogating the Florabase to get what you want. It's about looking at, you can either look at your genus or your family, your common name. Now, if you don't know how to spell the plant name, you can actually just put a couple of letters and then put an asterisk there, and it'll do the rest of the search for you. But what I've done here is I've asked for a photo. I've gone down here. I've asked for blue. I've asked for creeks and the habitat and the shrub and the southern Jarrah forest. So I've just asked for those things, and it's come up with a couple of plants. Now this may be, sometimes you're putting the cart before the horse, and it can lead to frustration because these plants may not be available in your nursery. So it's about probably reverse engineering, looking at your plants list from the nursery and making your way backwards from there. But this flora base is a really good resource to have to work out exactly when that species is going to flower, and what's its flower colour,
what soil type it grows in. It tells you that as well.
Yeah,
where it's found. So, and that can be quite helpful if you find a plant, and if you look, because Flora Base will have a map of where that plant is found within WA, and that gives you an indication of, it may grow down south, but there might be other populations of that plant up north. So then that you can extend the home of where it comes from.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking, we're just going to look at other aspects. So we want to just go through, some of what we've talked about and just kind of reinforce the things. So we talked about flower colour, the phenology, the structure. Now, the next thing we talk about is just other things, other structures in the garden. So wood is good, and both wood that is vertical, the vertical kind of logs, when you've got them coming out, you can actually drill holes in the wood, and from that you will encourage native bees and other kinds of animals in your garden. The horizontal logs, they are important, especially if you've got a little pond area. That if you can put a log that actually encroaches into the pond, that provides an area for your even your frogs to bask on, and your other insects, etc., and your birds to get water. So when you are looking at designing your habitat garden, water is important. It's important for all the animals around, and having a pond, if you don't have enough room for a pond, having a bird bath is still important.
And if you do have, if you've got a larger garden, remember you need lots of bird baths. So in my garden, I've got 3 in the front garden and there's about 5 in the back. So because different birds will come to different areas of your garden, as will insects. And it's important to keep the water clean as well. So always remember to put fresh water into those bird baths. And I have low dishes on the ground for lizards as well. Yeah.
So, the water quality is quite important, and there's quite a bit of research coming out now that maintaining that water quality maintains the health quality of the animals that are visiting, and also you've got mosquito larvae and things like that will build up in numbers. I actually like to put aquatic plants into my bird bath, and that provides a bit more shelter for when the birds are coming in. The other thing is and that provides nest sites for insects to sit on, and that's a food source for your insectivorous birds. The upright or the vertical logs are important when you've got a bird bath, because the little birds, or all birds, they use them as a perching site. So you know, picture yourself in Africa as a gazelle going for water.
Oh, I often do.
So you're going for water.
Yes.
What are you doing?
Well, I'll be looking around to see if there's any lions for a start.
That's right.
I'll be a little bit nervous. So I put on a big pair of stilts, which I have because I'm a gazelle. I climb up on a rock and have a bit of a look around before I go down to the water hole.
And there you have it, folks. So think of that little bird and think, okay, robins, think of the small birds, okay? Robins, wrens, pardalotes, little honey eaters coming down for a drink, and you think there's a kookaburra or a raven, bird of prey, butcher birds, all these magpies, they're all out there to get a feed. Those little birds are on the menu. So you think like the animal. So perching sites that provide an inn for those little birds is important. The other thing is if you plant those prickly plants and they overlay on your bird bath, and when you plant them, don't plant them in the line. Think of a bird escaping. They usually will use, they'll zigzag, that's the word. They'll zigzag. So plant those plants in a zigzag randomized manner. That way those little birds can make their escape, make good their escape. What I like to do is not only do I use those the prickly plants, but I like to put a creeper, like a native wisteria, a Hardenbergia, with those medium kind of medium height plants, low to medium height. And what those creepers do is that they create this layer of protection for those little birds, because the creeper actually will grow up on to the top of that plant, and it'll connect to the tops of those of that plant, and it creates this net, and the birds will use that as a protection kind of structure.
It's like a little corridor for them. It's all enclosed, so that they can't be seen by big eyeballs above.
Yeah. So, looking at those, making sure that water is good. Don't feed your wildlife, especially your maggies and other kinds of birds, because you're just going to make them more aggressive, and you're going to play a little bit of havoc with the food chain. But the thing that really is terrible is the state of the health of those animals.
Magpies in particular, especially if you're feeding them mince and then they feed that to the baby birds, it has a really detrimental effect on their health and causes all sorts of deformities and problems. So have biodiversity in your garden, and the magpies, you won't need to feed them. They will find all their own food in your garden.
Yeah, look at those parts of the habitat. You've got foraging areas, you've got shelter, breeding, all those things that an animal needs. You've got to look at encompassing, and because if you're in a built-up area, there's limitations to how far they can go. So if they find a spot in your garden, you try and make sure that they're small critters and they have a lot of surface area, and so they need to drink, they need to have food and water every day.
Regularly, yeah.
So it's having those structures and making sure the plants are prickly, have peeled bark, all those things, and continuous flower colour, and making sure that they're specific colours. So from that end, we're going to have a 5-minute break.
Yep, we'll have a little drink of water or a cup of tea.
And we'll be back in 5. All right, see you then. Okay.
We're back.
Hello.
Hope you had a nice little break, little snack. Okay, so we're just going to go through, give you an example of how easy it is to make a water feature.
Well, you ready?
Let's go. We're going to go soon. Don't you worry about that. Hey. This
is Sabrina's garden. Okay.
That's what I bought, folks. It was a little bit despairing at the time, but it was all I could afford. And there was a conglomeration of sheds. I don't know, the guy that owned it before I did loved sheds. I think I took away 10 skip bin loads of sheds. But it wasn't terribly inviting for us, let alone for creating any, I don't know what habitat was there, mostly rats and cockroaches, I think.
We had Shadow then.
That's right.
Shadow the dog.
My beautiful big old black Labrador.
Okay. So, excuse me,
It's a trigger finger. Oh, it's not going to work. No, you might have to do.
Okay. So under my direction.
Yes.
So one of the things, this is my journey into the habitat garden was dealing with frog-friendly gardens, and well, first of all, it was called frog ponds, and then I realised the biology of the frogs and went into the concept of creating a bog garden. So that's a pond here, and then on the outside you can see there's soil, and out here is a pond liner. So, and when you create that replicates what happens in nature, and that's where our frogs really prosper.
So you have to dig a bloody big hole, and basically then you have to fill the hole in again.
Yeah.
So you dig a big hole, you take all the soil out, you lay the pond liner down, and then you have to put all the soil back in the hole.
And the positioning of your, well, if you're going to have a pond in your habitat garden, a northerly aspect is important, because what will happen is the male frogs will tell you if you've done the right job. And I've done this many, many times. If you have not enough light, the male frogs won't go. If you have too much light, especially that hot westerly aspect in the summer, it will fry your bacteria in the bottom layer of your pond area. So it's a happy medium, and so the northerly aspect is what I've discovered is good. So first of all, you work out what your aspect is. You like to be able to have logs that are both, when you put in the horizontal logs, you dig them in, because once you dig them in, it looks like they've been there for 100 years.
And they hold the moisture as well.
Yeah, and that's where everything congregates during the summer. And so you can plant along where, with that log, you can plant just alongside it. These are Dampieras, and there's gardenias in there as well, and we'll show you what they look like.
So they're bog plants, and there's me. Look, people think, do you do your own gardening? Oh yes, I do. I do love to get dirty. I was filthy by the end of that, I have to say.
And just one thing is, I as my as an instructor, as the manager, site manager, this is a no-no, having a shovel in the bog garden. The pond liner is specific pond liner, not builder's plastic, because it's UV resistant. But having a shovel in this area is a no-no.
Oh, it's moving the log with it. Come on,
all right.
give me a bit of slack.
That's a no-no.
I had L plates on when we were doing this.
But if you, in this instance, we got through.
Allow it. I didn't puncture it.
Okay, and it's also important to have this pond liner. Actually, that don't bury that into the sand. Just allow it to sit proud. You can only, just if it sits up, a couple of millimeters, because what will happen is the dry will actually suck out the wet. It's like putting a rag in a teacup. Osmosis will do its thing, and it'll dry this boggy area out quicker. So, and then in the summertime, you have to intervene, because it's a finite area, and the water and the layer of soil, you're probably down 500 mil. You need to help out. So during the summer, a watering a week is really beneficial. And when you have the watering, if you're doing it early in the morning, you'll see the birds come out and do their stuff. It's quite enjoyable. There we go.
A picture of my bottom. Thank you, Johnny.
I didn't think of that. I was just looking at the logs, actually.
But you can see this fabulous log with the big hollow in it, which lots of things used to crawl in there.
Yeah. So, bringing it together, this is, okay, so there's lots of, there are two kinds of plants that are wetland species, okay? You've got your aquatic, you've got your inland plants that can live in water, okay? So these are the plants here. And then you've got your plants that can live in a boggy situation. And these are the plants within that pond liner. So, and the idea is when the winter comes, this pond area will flood out to there.
Winter inundation.
And the amazing thing is you'll get an amazing diversity of insects coming in, because the insects, like the butterflies, they drink mineralised water, and that mineralised water is on that soil. So you will get lots of beneficial insects coming in to your boggy area. And in the pond area, you can put in some native pygmy perch, and they'll take care of your mosquito larvae and stuff.
The great thing about the western pygmy perch and the Swan River goby is they are brown, so they can't be seen. Well, that's why we had the actual aquatic plants as well, as they can hide in there. But if you put goldfish in there, then of course every heron and bird will come down and have morning tea in your pond. And
in turn, they'll eat your tadpole.
That's right.
So
yeah.
Not a very good outcome. Okay, so I'm just going to skip along here. That's the result. So with our boggy area, you have got access to lots of boggy plants that will flower. So you've got your yellows, the goodenias here, and then you've got your dampieras. I think they're dampieras. Yep. And they'll just love it.
Cascade down. That's the goodenia.
Yeah.
Such a beautiful plant.
And there's a dampieras. Yeah. So you see the two colours, the contrast. They contrast and they weave in amongst each other. It's quite effective. There's a slender tree frog.
A lovely little fella. Now I had never seen dragonfly larvae before until I had put the pond in. They would have to be the weirdest looking things. They don't
like
look
a
anything
prehistoric animal.
Yeah, they're really bizarre looking. It was so exciting to find that, wasn't that, it was only after a few months that all sorts of things started arriving in the garden. But I had the clicking frogs,
Yes.
And I was hanging the washing out in the line one day, and there was a kookaburra sitting on the washing line, came down, got the crinia, the little frog, burrowing frog, landed back on the clothesline, and I said, "You dropped that bloody frog," and it did. Dropped it, picked it up, put it back in the pond. I don't know if it lived or not, but so kookaburras, you can tell them off and they'll drop the frog for you.
Yeah, you know. So if you look closely, hopefully you can see the pointer is. You see that's what's happening. That's a myrophyllum, that particular species, and that's the dragonfly there. I just watched it and it filled up its. I have a whole sequence of photographs of it filling up its wings, and that's the product there. It was something to behold. You can actually see the remnants of it over here.
Look.
Yeah, there's, I'm just trying to remember what that's called. Okay. Upright logs.
Yes, heavy ones.
They were.
You can tell,
so you can see those guys.
we were in winter gear, and this is later on in the afternoon, but I had some fabulous help because that log weighed an absolute ton.
Yeah. There he is. So you can see how all the principles are coming to, and there you go. There you have it, folks. That's us done.
Yeah.
See you later. No, not really.
No, not really. But it was such an exciting journey to watch how alive my garden became once that pond was put in. It's incredible.
So water bodies are important, whether you have a little frog-friendly garden or you have a bird bath. Here's some little design principles. Just plan things out. Even if you've just shifted into the place, sit there, let it, be there for perhaps a year, a few seasons before you're going to go in and attack it. And then you can do a bit of research. And once you've done that research, understand that things don't live in isolation. So my journey with the frogs is because the frogs live in the air, land and water. You've got to have all these other things that live with, how do they eat? They live on land, but they breed and they have a water life cycle, but they live most of their time on land. Diversity is the key.
Absolutely, 100%. And it's so, having diversity also, it's very pleasing to look at. So, you'll have something different happening in your garden every single week of the year. And that is actually really exciting.
So you're looking at diversity of strata from the ground, middle story, and then you've got your canopy cover. And usually the canopy cover is usually less. The ground kind of story makes up the majority.
Yeah.
And then you've got the middle story as well. So the middle story for little birds is very important because they like little thickets, and they use those thickets. When you're living in a country, you're sitting around, you're looking at little birds come through, and they come through in an entourage. So you'll get the whistlers up top, then you'll get the thornbills in the middle, and even your grey fantails, and then your wrens will be lower. And you'll get the robins as well, and on they come through and they will do their job. And if you've got a habitat garden, if you've got a veggie garden, they'll come through and pick out your moths, etc. Look at planting in 3s or 5s.
It's a much nicer balance, particularly if you're using grasses, things like kangaroo paws. You never just put a single grass on its own.
Yeah.
And then you get, if you plant in 3s or 5s, then you get, the other thing is you get enough food source for that particular insect or bird or whatever.
Yeah. So you're looking at, and also I like to work in circular kind of patterns around the water body. Even if you've got your water body here, you can make little circles of things. If you've got grass trees, are a good example of kind of communal planting. So when you're putting grass trees, you think of a family, and so you look at like putting in these different stages of them,
because they all share resources.
Okay. Oh, here's our favourite, the possum friendly garden. So what the ringtail possums need, especially the ringtail possums, yeah. So you've got, they do favour the Myrtaceae kind of, I don't know what's happened to this PowerPoint.
Oh, it's having a little.
Okay, so the ringtails, they're Myrtaceae, the eucalypts are one of their favourite plants, fodder plants. I don't know what's happened to this. Excuse me for a sec.
Well, while you're doing that, I've made myself a hat for tonight.
Let's have a look.
It's a beautiful hat.
Did I say it was dress up?
Look, I think it's quite fetching. What do you
What's
reckon?
that?
I think actually I could I could wear it on Melbourne Cup Day.
You'll be the only one there.
But I think if I was a little possum, I would love this little hat. I'm just trying to make sure that they can see where the.
Can you see that? I'll just show you. All right. This is the start. Okay, so what we're looking at is how you would accommodate a ringtail possum from a roosting point of view. So they are nocturnal creatures. So they are very active at night. During the day, they nest, and so there's one there. Hello. So this is Katrina's work, Katrina from the LCC, and so these are two hanging baskets with clips, zip ties on them, and they have a hanging component.
Which comes with the basket?
Which comes with the basket. This is the finished product. So what they've done is they've got both an entry, but at the back they have an escape. They've got an escape area out the back as well. And just to camouflage it, we've gone and put some peppies. Peppies are probably one of their favourite plants. And it's an interesting thing that what I was going to talk to before when the PowerPoint done its own thing is the peppies are very low in nutrition, and so they will smell. Plants produce this, what they call phenolic acids, these particular plants, and when you look at ringtails in the wild, or even if you've got them as a carer, they will come along and they'll smell the plant, two plants, and they'll smell it. And what they're smelling is for these acids. And these acids will give an idea of the nutrition of the plant. And so two identical of the same species, one smells one and it'll eat the one that has less of these phenolic acids. And there's research out there that's saying that in the home, there's plants that are that survive in wetland areas, especially in that marginal time of the year, that have a higher nutrient content. Nitrogen is probably the most important factor. And so the home gardener, if you are living in the southwest and you've got yourself a habitat garden and you want to maintain, you want to sustain those ringtail possums, a bit of mineral fertilisers go a long way. just a little helping hand to providing a food resource to those animals is quite important. So, you know about mineral fertilisers.
Absolutely. And it's very important to use the slow release mineral fertilisers because the plant will uptake when it needs it.
And that's one of the things. Is so with ringtails, the peppies are very important. They'll eat the peppies, but I've seen them eat jarrah. You can, and they will eat nectar. They'll eat, the banksias when they're in flower. So they get stuck into that. They're quite. They will need water, especially when it gets hot. So what you need to do is when you're putting your plants, when you're looking at your possums that are in your garden, when they come down to the ground, that's when they're very vulnerable. So having a watering point, those hanging baskets.
Yeah, up in a tree.
Yeah. So they're important. So the possum doesn't come down to the ground. So they require peppies. Well, peppies, even the dwarf peppies, provide a very good nutritional food source to them. Eucalypts, small eucalypts. If you're on a bush block or whatever, they will eat jarrah leaves. So it's the leaves that they do eat. But so those are important things. What you do with your pets as well is important. Your pets, I have 2 dogs. I have them inside at night. And because the ringtails come down, as I said, they're nocturnal animals. Sometimes in the summer when it's really hot, you will get them coming down to ground, and they will be looking for that water. And with climate change, it's becoming more apparent.
Well, particularly the southwest has become much drier in terms of rainfall.
Yeah.
Over the last 50 years.
Yeah. So understanding that there's the ringtails like even the wattles they'll eat. I've seen them eat acacia salignas and things like that. Yeah. The peppies are the most common. The different eucalypts they'll eat at different times. So the ringtails are probably one of those species that most people that are in the southwest will see a ringtail, and I'll just show the picture of them again. So they have that definitive tail, and they're a whole lot smaller than our brush-tailed possums. And as I said, they're critically endangered. So they're saying that they're less than 20,000 in the wild. To put that next to polar bears are double that. So the ringtail possums are quite low in their numbers.
So, Johnny, if people build these drays, the possum drays, which they're not expensive to make, and they're are there workshops that people can, or websites that people could look at how to make a possum dray? Yeah,
well, the Leschenault Catchments Council have undertaken possum dray building workshops,
right?
And they are quite well attended.
Yep.
Through the years, there's been modifications. If you are looking at making a dray, the other thing you could look at making are these nesting boxes. So the important thing when you're looking at these nesting boxes is the size of the entrance. This originally was about 80 mil, the size of this entrance. Now it's been reduced to 60 mil, because if you have it too big, the the brush tails will take over.
Ah, so it's just specifically for the ringtail.
Yeah.
Unless they get a little bit porky.
So there's a few things that have happened with these nesting boxes. There's another thing to reduce bee invasion is there's ventilation holes. So these holes here actually go in at the base and they point up, so when it rains the water doesn't go into the box itself. There's another thing, another part of the ventilation. When I close this lid, you see that there? That is more ventilation for to reduce or discourage bees. So European bees are probably one of those animals that can displace a lot of our hollow-dependent species. So there's been a lot of work done to reduce the bee invasion into these nesting boxes. There's also in the lid here some with the phascogales. They actually put a piece of carpet under the lid, and they say that that reduces the incidence of bees getting in there. Wood selection is important. Don't use treated pine. So, you know, when you've got it, use the non-treated pine. You paint it. You have these lugs on the side. You've also got, you would put it on, if you're putting it into a tree, you can either fasten it to the tree directly with screws, or you could have some wire with some hose, and that could go around the tree like that. The other thing is, I'll put this over here. Inside, there's these scores. Can you see the scores?
Yeah.
So that's for the babies to be able to get up. So the scores have shown to improve the survivability of the babies in able to grip their way get their way out of the box.
The box, clever.
So, yeah, they are all the time changing the design because of their observations with monitoring them. Probably one of the things that you need to do with your nesting box as well, when you place them in a southeast or a northeast aspect of your house or trees. If you're using the little planting, those little...
Oh yeah, the hanging baskets.
The hanging baskets. Put them into a like a fork of the tree. If you just use them to hang, the possum's going to, it's going to swing, and they're not really.
They're not swingers.
Yeah, that's the bottom word. That's the bottom line.
They like the good, sturdy, solid sleep. Yeah. Not one that's going to ring as the wind gets up.
That's correct. So that's it's kind of like a segue into the next part of our talk is when you've got, not only you've got ringtail possums and you've got other kind of little hollow dependent animals, there's other kinds of designs that are there. Here's which one have you got?
No, I'm out.
Oh.
I've worn my hats.
Okay. I don't know if you can see it that well. So what I'll do is I'll point the camera down to it. Right.
That's good. That's a good shot.
So this is a pardalote nesting box. So the pardalote nesting box has got the entrance, and it's really important that you the entrance is away from this back bit. So you need at least probably 40 centimetres length. This is 30 millimetres, And if you have a look at this, this is an innovation of, you know, thinking of the animal. There's a little perching site, so the bird can actually get inside, and they usually nest in this particular cavity, this particular part here. Once again, right, so this is non-treated pine.
Take it.
Non-treated pine. It's got 2 layers. The layers here. This is all about insulation, and it's very well made. So I would put that on the side of the house. Pardalotes are quite partial to nesting. You had one in your bathroom.
I had pardalotes nesting in my bathroom for many, many years. Unfortunately, the bathroom floor collapsed. Well, the bath just went right through the floor. So I had to revamp the bathroom, which meant removing the walls. So there were 2 holes in the wall from where there would have been old pipes going in. So they were, you know, like 19 mil pipe holes. And the pardalotes would go in one hole and come out the other. So they nested in there, and when we took the wall off, the nest went a little bit longer than this box, and it went all the way along the rafter, the jarrah rafter.
Okay.
And you could see where they had built on the nest every single cycle. So when I had the new bathroom built, the first thing I said to the builder was, you need to put 2 holes in that perfectly new wall, because that's where they were completely, totally safe in there. And you'd hear all the little birds, you'd hear the birds chirping.
Wow.
It was just fantastic. So if you don't want to drill a hole in your walls, next best thing.
Yeah. So these designs, you can actually get them from the Land for Wildlife website, and just look for nesting box designs, and they've got this humongous list of designs that you can get for your target species. So from your various birds to your marsupials, and, you know, the pardalotes are only, you know, yay big, and to have a pair of pardalotes, you know, frequenting your area. You know, having said that with the pipe, I would incorporate like a little perch coming out, so that way they're able to, you know, access and get out. So it's about getting in the zone and really understanding what target species that you want to attract, and it's quite rewarding.
I'm just going to pass these.
Sorry about the presentation, folks. It's got a mind of its own, so it's clicking through things that we.
It doesn't seem to want to just rest. There we are.
There it goes. Okay, so this is a bat box.
Look, one's arrived already. It must be Halloween.
Oh, yes. That's very apt, isn't it? So the bats are mainly probably that size, you know, and so the important things in their design is non-treated pine, the scoring, and the little accommodation there, so the young can. Well, the animals themselves, they have got a high surface area. If you've ever seen bats actually sitting behind peeled bark or where they roost, they have this constant shake about them. And so they sit up there and they'll just grip with these little extendable arms.
Yeah, their wings.
And they'll do that during the day. At night, as I said,
they're out.
They're out. So
they're partying hard.
They'll eat their body weight. They do say it's about 1,000 mosquitoes per night.
1,000 mosquitoes a night. You can't. And there are bats. I've got bats at my place. I have a big lemon-scented gum, and in summer I uplight it, and you see these very fast little shadows just going zing, zing.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And as I said, you can hear some of them, but you can't hear them all. So that's that. As I said, with the box, the nesting box for possums, etc., they need to be about 3 metres at minimum above. So it just keeps out of the way of those land-dwelling kind of predators. And also for the bats, it gives them a bit of an access, a flying access, so they don't get taken out. So that's the kind of, they're the things that you can do to influence and encourage animals into your garden. So,
and keep them there.
And keep them there.
Yeah. So, and then what happens is the system starts linking up, and then other elements come into that system. So you end up creating an entirely different ecosystem to if you just have a row of roses and box hedging. Which doesn't really give back. We have to think about loss of habitat, and it is our responsibility to give something back, to provide something for other species on this planet. Because we're so self-focused, our only species, once we start losing lots of elements from that system, then the system will collapse. And if that collapses, so do we.
Yeah. So, it's for me, it's rewarding. With Sabrina and myself, when I go to Sabrina's house, it's always a thing of looking around and seeing what she's got in the garden, besides veggies and things like that. But I encourage you to go to your garden centres and have a look at various plants that you're not used to normally having. So your pea flowers, look at those. Look at your little wattles. Look at your plants that a lot of garden centres, unfortunately, they will sell you plants, bird friendly, blah, blah, blah. And as I said at the start of the PowerPoint, those plants that we've had been hammered into us, such as bottlebrush and grevilleas, they have a place, but they're not the only plant that you should be including in your system. It's about diversity.
And make a list. Like, the big thing is to actually make a list of plants that flower throughout the year. And if you have that, then that's really one of the best starts that you can have for your garden, so that you make sure you cover all the different colours and you cover all the different months of the year. And it's and then start exploring different colour schemes in your garden. My garden, I grow a lot of my own food, but the majority of the garden is native plants. And it's interesting, some of them are short-lived, and that doesn't matter, because the ones that are short-lived are usually very fast-growing. So once they die down, then all your other shrubs or trees are more established, and you have more shade. Remember that your garden will evolve. So areas that were full sun, once you've got trees in there, eventually they're going to be shady. So that means that you can put a different plant in that area, or you have to move a plant that likes full sun and is now in shade, move it somewhere else into the garden. And my garden's basically half the plants are on wheels. I dig them up and move them all the time. So evolve along with your garden, and remember, it's not just your garden. This has the capacity to actually give a home and a food supply and a nesting area for a lot of other species that live in our cities, live in regional areas. If you're lucky enough to live on a bush block, then you probably have a much greater diversity of species that come in. But it's vitally important that people that live in the city understand just how critical it is that we have gardens that give back to nature.
Okay. All right.
Oh, we've got some questions.
Okay. We're into our Q&A session. We've got 3 questions so far. What good do ticks do? Well, I've asked that question to myself. I've put a tick near ants, and the ants cart the tick away. So if you don't like ticks, you got to rub yourself. You got to get yourself some ants.
They have quite a ants have a very strong smell, so maybe that's what it is.
Yeah.
But they must have some other purpose, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Other stuff would eat ticks.
Yeah, that's right. Other things would eat ticks. That's a good question for you to research and get back to us, Anonymous.
Yes, and Julie R has asked what soil type for the bog garden. Well, that soil that you saw was the soil that was actually there.
Yeah,
I didn't import anything. That was the soil that I had.
Yeah. So with the bog garden, I like to use clean soil. So I've even used one of the bog gardens I made at the South Bunbury Primary School. We used soil from the port because it's been, it's basically neutral.
Yes.
And beach sand, that was great. But if you've got just normal soil, what I do is I like to just give it a bit of a rinse. So you put it all into a wheelbarrow and you just rinse it off. So you're actually starting from scratch without any nutrients and things like that. Because you don't know whether it's got lime from building products or, things like that could actually make it toxic. So I like to just get it into a wheelbarrow and then just rinse it through. So we're able to, and then, you just put it in and you'll find over time it'll start to, it's a succession thing. It'll start to get a little bit darker. You'll get leaf litter on it. Leaf litter is good for your bog garden. That's where a lot of that's where a lot of the frogs actually live. That's part of their protection. That encourages insects to come in, so the frogs don't have to go too far. So it's all about providing shelter and more habitat and places, food sources.
Linkages.
Do we have bats in the Bunbury town area? Yes, we do. Yep. So you go up where the lights are through any of those. They like to fly through open areas. Even if you are in the bush, you'll see a little bit of an open area at dusk. And if you look up around dusk, they're flying over the top of you. They don't fly too high. Well, there's different bats. The bat that's the three-tailed striped bat, that flies pretty low, and it's probably the most common one that I know of. There's Gould's bats and things like that. So, Bunbury area, throughout the whole Western Australia, there are these micro bats. How can I save my jarrah tree from being decimated by beautiful ringtails. Well, it's happened to me with different plants that I've got. I would look at getting some peppies, co-planting those peppies, and some understory to go with that particular jarrah. Yeah, it must mean that your jarrah has got low acids in it, phenolic acids, and so it must have a high nutritional content to it. The jarrahs are undergoing quite a decline because the microbes are not there in the soil as much as what they used to, because of the things like quendas, little bandicoots, etc., aren't actually bringing the fungus, rotating the fungus and reintroducing that to the plant. So you may even look at inoculating the plant with some microbes, some mycorrhizae, which you can buy.
You can buy soil microbes now in a tub.
I think you can get it from White and Emmett in Bunbury.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
and that's something that we need to be mindful of too. As the climate does change, it has a big effect on soil and soil biology. So, you know, we really need to think about how we can nurture our soil, because that's the basis for all life on this planet. So putting soil microbes in is a really great start. And, you know, if you put it in particularly before rainfall, that's the best time to do it, really.
And there could be, because your jarrah is stressed in the first place, all those things that you can do to help it, even inoculating or injecting it with phosphite. So the Capel Shire has got kits. You can inject your jarrah tree, and that would safeguard it against dieback and other kinds of funguses. You probably have to go back every 5 years and inject it, but now's the time of the year to do it, and you do it in the morning. It doesn't take long. Ring the Shire. I know that Ray McPherson there. She'll help you out, and they have an injecting kit that you'll be able to access.
And probably an information sheet on, you know, all the best timing and things like that to use it.
Yeah. Okay. There's another question about New Zealand trees too, Christmas trees. I have seen that. It's a combination of things that are adding to their decline. It's microbes as well as.
What's wrong with the New Zealand Christmas tree?
The ringtails are going for those.
Oh, instead of the agonis.
Yeah, and they strip the top parts of the tree.
Oh.
Yeah, it's quite prominent.
Oh, right. I wasn't aware of that.
I would be looking at co-planting with those Christmas trees, just putting in some dwarf peppies to take the stress off.
And dwarf peppermints are great, actually. You can train those dwarf peppermints into a very small umbrella canopy little tree.
Yeah, and they're really sculpturous.
Yeah.
The trunks on them are really,
There's a place in Denmark where they have done a Japanese sort of pruning. Yeah. So the agonis is on a trunk, and then they've trained it to go vertically.
Yeah.
They've
trimmed from the base,
from the bottom. So you under prune. So if you've got the dwarf peppermint, every year you under prune it so that you get the trunk, and then you can actually train it to go sort of horizontally or horizontally and then vertically. But there's one in Denmark where it's beautiful. It's like it's very Japanesey. It looks, and I think that's something we don't prune our native plants enough. We're not adventurous enough with them. And you can make some, you know, wonderful cubby houses for animals out of pruning our native plants.
The pruning thing is, you just got to be wary of when, like, native plants are prunable, you know, they do better out of it. You just got to be wary if you're pruning them if you're going to prune them before they're going to flower, well, you're not going to have any flower that year. So just be wary that when you're going to prune, you know, what is it, 1/3?
Yep, usually 1/3 is very safe. Yep.
But if you're going to prune something that's going to flower in spring and you're going to prune it in June, well, you're probably not going to have
just lost all your flowers.
Yeah.
So the rule of thumb for native plants is you generally prune them when they have finished flowering. So the only time we never prune is December, January, February, because the bark on plants can actually get sunburnt during those really, you know, high with the hot easterlies, and then you get 42-degree days. It's never that flash for a plant. They do suffer a little bit.
Okay. Is there any other kinds of questions that we've...
I thought we saw a whole pile.
Is there a better type of rock to use around your bog garden? Limestone, gravel? I would say use the geology of your area. If you, Cheryl, you're in Jalora, so the limestone is the rock that you would use, and you can get that from limestone's pretty cheap.
Yeah, it is.
And I like using the big limestone rocks. They provide quite a, you know, they're an entry statement as well. If you use rocks and then you plant into them. At the start, when you're doing things with those big rocks, it looks like a moonscape, but give it time.
It doesn't take long. No. And if you want them to sort of get that weathered look really quickly, you just paint yogurt on them. Yeah. And they'll colour up really, really quickly. Don't get the yogurt in the water though. That's very important.
That's the other thing with the bog garden or your pond area or even your bird garden, is having your bird bath is having if you've got toxic plants that are the leaves are falling, such as oleander, it can be an issue for the survivability of the animals that are in the water. So, and sometimes putting it too close to heavy feeders such as citrus and things, it can cause issues. So be aware of that.
And the other thing I remember when we were doing my bog garden, Johnny, was the selection of sedges and rushes, because some of them have enormous root systems and they just go straight through the dam liner.
Yeah. So steer away from, if you're looking at sedges and rushes for your bog garden, steer away from what they call the Baumia species, Baumea. They have got rhizomes that will go through road base. So just be wary of that. There's another question, is what is a dominant rock in Leschenault? That's pretty much limestone through that area as well. So there's quarries up and down there that show that that's the dominant.
And most of the landscape supply places, they have limestone. Look for limestone with character. Like, limestone is wonderful because it weathers in all sorts of different ways, and you can get some with, you know, holes that go all the way through. So take your time and pick through a few limestone rocks to find one that's got lots of character and would make a home for something as well.
Yeah. Actually, I was saying one of them with a letterbox, and in the letterbox was geckos. So they found little eggs. Yeah. So that was exciting for them. So I guess it brings us to the end of our presentation. There is
just Katrina here from LCC. There was just another little question that was put through the chat. A few people were wondering if they might be able to get a copy of your slides after the presentation. Are we able to email those through to the participants?
Yeah.
Yeah. And a few people, I think, wanted to see or were wondering if you could put the names on the bottom of the plants that you had in your slides.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It just they're specific to a certain soil type. So I'll just make sure that they understand that they're, you know, where the soil type and the area.
Great.
Yeah.
And I think there was just one other question that you pretty much did answer. It was about placing the drays. So you did mention that, but I just wanted to also mention that LCC does have a brochure that details that quite specifically. So if anyone wanted to email us to get a copy of that information, then we're happy to send that out as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Fantastic.
There is a question. There is feedback forms that we would like you to fill out, just to get more. Yeah, we want to know how we went, and we want to find out what else we can present. So your feedback is very important. I'd just like to thank actually Katrina. Like we're presenting here, a whole team has come together for this to happen, and especially Katrina for being our backbone and person overlooking everything. And also, once again, thanks to the South West Catchments Council and the National Land Care Program for funding the project for the Western ringtail possums.
And it's a great resource, and you know the work that you guys do is fabulous, and the information is really thorough, and it really will help guide people to what they can do. And it's not, you know, it's not an expensive exercise, but once you start creating a habitat garden, you will be hooked.
Yes, it is very contagious. Yeah. And then you'll get, I've done advanced frogscaping, and I can see that there's an advanced fauna friendly or habitat garden course, that because those people that wanting more information and being more specific, you know, for phascogales and other little animals that survive and those kinds of things.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for participating tonight. I hope you're hooked as what Johnny and I are, and go out there and create habitat.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.